Hey guys, and welcome to another video of Down to Business, as we know, aimed at all things for small and medium business, or large business for that matter, but really trying to help people that may not look in this space often enough on their business rather than getting stuck in it. And today I'm joined by Dean Noonan. It's quite a really interesting one we're doing today, and probably a bit left field of what most people would think about when we talk about, looking after their people. And Dean's from Check 5, and I'll get him to give you a bit more of an intro, but we're talking all things wellbeing, okay, and probably a misconstrued topic in many cases. So welcome, Dean.
Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming along, mate. And as I said, wellbeing, it's a very, probably newish in some cases topic. I'm sure you're going to tell me otherwise, but for mainstream it's probably a bit new. But before we get into that, you've got a very interesting background and where you've come from and that sort of thing. So why don't we give a bit of a background on Dean Noonan?
Yeah, certainly, mate. Look, my past life, for many years, I was in the New South Wales Police. So that's a bit of a career part there. And then probably for the last 10 or so years, a little bit more than that, I've been an employee over at the Newcastle Knights.
Yeah, right.
So obviously a little bit of variance there. Probably both attract around a foundation of coaching. That's what's interested me. I've been dabbling in the coaching type arena for a number of years. But yeah, that's the background of
that. And both in sport and in corporate?
Yeah, sport and corporate, yeah. Interesting little backstory there. Probably my later years in the police, I found myself on more occasions than not venturing out into a back cell and sitting down with a prisoner or an offender and really wanting to talk to them and wanting to get down into the depths of why they were there, and that really instigated something in me to think, look, this is something that I'm really interested in, with some good results. I was able to offer a bit of guidance here and there, and funnily enough, probably haven't shared that before, but that's something that started the process for me, was talking to those offenders sometimes at 3 o'clock in the morning way back then. And that's what started the interest in this whole thing for me.
You weren't the one in the cell, you were?
No. Occasionally had to check to make sure I was the right one leaving.
Mate, it's interesting, and I think there's a common thing through these videos, whether we're talking to advisors, consultants, or business people themselves, or identities, etc. There's been a constant theme around teams and teamwork and getting more out of your teams, etc. And I mean, that's really your ride in your runway, isn't it, for what you're doing with now Check 5. So what's Check 5?
Absolutely. So Check 5, I guess it's to probably segue into what Check 5 is. If I was to go back and give that bit of a background again, probably 10 years ago now, with the NRL, the job that I got was called the welfare manager. And what that meant was that fundamentally, excuse the French, but the shit would hit the fan.
Yep.
And then the welfare guy would get a phone call, and in we'd go and react to that situation, and we'd try and cover it up and talk with families.
A clean-up rather than...
Absolutely, a clean-up type process, which is what the welfare guy did. And to their credit, the NRL were really active in this space, and I can remember beats way back when we got this title called Wellbeing Managers. We went down to Sydney for pretty much 12 months and just learning about this process of wellbeing. And I'd never heard of it. I've never heard of what that was. I didn't realise, and I understand now it's a really familiar term. But back then it wasn't. And so we became these wellbeing managers, and that was the title we got. And the difference is that they really astutely introduced a process, a proactive process, to try and get to those problems before they actually arose.
Because when we say, let's define well-being, so I think when before really understanding of you, well-being to me is physical, health and what you're eating and all that kind of stuff. But I think that I'm really invested in more recent years, I guess, and then my coach works with me on this as well around mindset. And when you say well-being, that's really about getting your head right, isn't it?
Yeah, look, interesting enough, it's Check 5 probably, and myself, I probably challenge well-being to be just that one avenue to mental health. Again, a lot of the dialogue out there that you'll hear today, there is an automatic assimilation with wellbeing to mental health. I believe, exactly like you said, it's a lot more than that. And what Check 5, I guess the synergy with the 5 is that over the years, my years experience, particularly in the sporting side of things, I've narrowed it down to what I believe is 5 core areas. And if we can get them right, and this is nothing new, probably the delivery is something that's quite unique out there. But fundamentally, if we're looking at relationships, health, work, finances, and then your leisure time, if we can look at that as an overall foundation to your well-being, and obviously those areas branch out into different components, but fundamentally that's what the Check 5 process is. So you're bang on, well-being is a little bit more than just, I'm feeling fit, I'm feeling healthy. And Check 5 in particular has quite a unique, different approach to how we approach that.
So maybe without giving everything away, maybe talk a bit more about that approach.
Yeah, I guess it stems fundamentally around, mate, the difference between that welfare reaction and then introducing a process that will actually get right to the core of what's going on.
And before there may be a problem or a problem being shown, or.
Yeah, that's right. Now again, I think if we look at a lot of the mainstream principles out there, particularly in business, and you'll find that there's some foundations set down, and this is how we attack this stuff. What I can see, but is that a large majority of it is again that same reactionary process. So we'll instigate, I guess, little quasi initiatives that may assist a little bit. But if we're talking about designating, I guess, a full-blown program into how this works, and that's what we need to happen. We want some results out of this. It's all well and good to introduce a wellbeing program, but we want to get something out of it. We want some outcomes.
Yeah, so it's not just ticking a box so you can look. Yeah.
Exactly. And what I think is out there at the moment is, for example, programs that we're waiting until our employees identify, look, I've got a problem, I've got put my hand up that I've got some sort of issue in whatever aspect of my life, which is great. We want that, we want that to happen. But I think if we can go a step before that.
Yeah, and I can probably relate that. I mean, our business employs a lot of people, and I work with a lot of businesses that employ a lot of people. And I think the challenge for most people is we've been brought up in a society, especially in Australia, where she'll be right, or don't show your cards too early, and that's it's hard for people to actually feel they can put their hand up. So I like the way you're going with that regardless. So what you're saying really is, whether you've got a problem or not, this is good hygiene to get into from a point of view of making sure you turn up better, the business will get the benefits of that.
I guess the difference with it is, mate, and this is what I'm hoping, we can really benefit some business out there. I've set this whole thing up, and it's based on what I'm really familiar with in sport, particularly elite sport. So I've worked at the Knights, but the role itself has, over a pretty extended period of time now, it's given me the opportunity to engage with a number of different sporting bodies out there. And we're talking universally as well, like globally, the NFL and the NBA and different areas like that, the Olympic sporting bodies. So you get a familiarity with what's actually going on out there in elite sport.
Yeah.
The Australian Institute of Sport in particular are pretty heavy in this space. The difference that we've done with Check 5 is it's a performance-based model. So it's twofold. So for a business owner, not only are you basically looking after the well-being of your people, which will be a natural process that will happen with the program, but what we can now do is identify performance standards tangible results that we can actually move forward. The synergy is, and this is probably what started the whole thing, that's been happening in sport forever and a day. I'll give you the example I used around coaching. So one of the foundations to this is coaching. So if we're both rugby league blokes, we like a rugby league, and if we use that as an example, if you think about the athletes that have made reference to their coaches over a period of time, and you think of the good ones, and it doesn't just have to be rugby league, but Wayne Bennett, John Wooden in basketball, and any of the really good, Phil Jackson, Michael Jordan's coach, Craig Bellamy, closer to home. If you ever listen to those athletes talk about their experiences with those coaches, so let's say, for example, Craig Bellamy at the Melbourne Storm. The reference to that man or that person is always about how they improve them as a person, or they had time for me, or they cared for me, or whatever. So you'll never hear a reference to those guys about, he taught me to pass left to right, or he, improved my kicking game, or whatever. The good coaches always have this quality about caring for the athlete. And that's the difference here. What we want to do here, and our ambition is to get business owners and business leaders to start with that principle through a coaching process. Start to show that they care, and Beach, you've heard me say this 100 times, you're probably sick of it, but genuinely care. It needs to be genuine. And then when we've got that principle, then we can instigate a process to the well-being.
So on that point, I'd imagine, and I am privy to a bit more of this than probably most of our viewers, but I imagine up front, you can't force people to care. So I imagine part of your process is sort of trying to filter out, some of that up front with the coaches, first of all, before you even touch the employees, if you like, for a figurative.
Absolutely, and it's actually step one. So step one is if businesses are out there to think, in particular, with some research behind it, the mid-management level seems to be a pretty universal acceptance around there's a lack of skill set there. So we can't just introduce a program and then have those supervisors at that mid-management level just, righto, off you go, do your best.
Which to be honest, that's how most of it happens at the moment, because most people get promoted on how long have you been there, or, have you got more of a skill set in your vocation, as opposed to have you actually been shown how to manage people? Have you been shown how to coach people?
Correct, yeah. You bang on. And then but there's just this acceptance that, look, you've been here a long time, now I need you to do that. So it's a critical first step, is that we need to get those people skilled in what we're about to introduce to them. And the very first step of that is to show them how to be real in caring.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Mate, we'll probably cover off a little bit of this, but I think it's a good segue to say, why is wellbeing then, I guess, becoming such a big focus for businesses and business owners these days? You mentioned tangible benefits, but how's that been playing out?
Yeah, we've discussed, I bounce off you all the time. I make I'm under no illusions as to, probably my business credibility. And that's why I bounce off guys like yourself and the guys at PKF to really get that understanding from a business point of view. What I do know is people and coaching, and I do know how to do that. And in answer to your question, how you assimilate that into the I guess the process, it's really important. It's really important to bring that in to how you actually roll this out. If we can't do that, if we haven't got that initial understanding, then those results that you're talking about, the tangible results, are not going to happen. The connection is all around sport, mate. This is really familiar territory in elite sport, and I think we spoke to you before about skill development. So that's another part of the process. So it's not a matter of just presenting to a group and then saying, okay, look, I've said what I'm going to say, off you go now, I'll see you in a month's time.
Yeah, because let's talk about that. I mean, that's what a lot of people may be thinking, that, consultant comes in, here's a spiel, here's a program, see you later.
Yeah.
How do you actually work with business owners and their teams? I mean, we've mentioned with mid-management, but it takes a bit through that.
Well, once again, to give you a reference to that too, and I think, for you, sorry, but for everyone listening in, best explanation I can give around that is the foundation of a presentation. The best presentation that I have ever seen personally, and I've seen plenty just being in this space, was a guy from the Resilience Project.
Oh, so it wasn't mine.
You were second.
Yeah, right.
Third.
Last.
A guy from the Resilience Project called Hugh Van Cullenberg. Now,
read his book.
Yeah,
right,
people might know out there. So way back in the day, there was ourselves and the Melbourne Storm were actually quite active in getting Hugh involved in the NRL. So 2 clubs were identified, that was us and Melbourne, that had a bit to do, probably Melbourne in particular, a guy down at Melbourne called Brian Phelan, attached to Hugh, and we sort of picked the ball up from there. And so, sorry, I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent.
No, go for it.
Without doubt, Hugh's presentation and the content that he had is the best that I've seen in 10 years. Outstanding, really, really good. So what he would come in is basically once a year, come in and present, and we'd have a room full of players and staff that would walk out going, that's fantastic. And this is what started this whole thought process for me, is that what I then started to see, and I think a lot of people out there would be really familiar with this, is some core principles that had been locked in. Undisputable. Everyone just agreed, if I do that, my life's going to be outstanding. And then over a pretty measurable period, you would start to see it all fade. To the point where I can now identify that I think over those years, he was coming up for about 3 or 4 years, Hugh, he had probably presented to say 300 odd players during that time, and staff, maybe a little bit more than that. And for me personally, I know of 2, possibly 3 people out of that whole audience who to this day now actively practice what it is. So what that showed me is just this one-off presentation, no matter how good it is, because it was good, it was really good. We need to go further, we need to go a step further. So for me, what Check 5 is about is exactly what you said. It's not about coming in and presenting to your crew and saying, right, this is what I need you to do, and then you don't see me again for a month or 6 weeks or whatever. It won't work. I need to, and the team, the Check 5 people, everyone involved needs to engage in your business. We need to become part of it. And then we need to identify a skill with those coaches. And then over that period of time, just like they do in sport, that's how it is. That's how it works in sport. Coaches, a whole group of them will get in a room, they'll look at a skill and say, we're deficient in this area, we're no good. Okay, for the next 6 weeks, that's what we're going to bang on.
Because of repetition, it's like, you know, I saw a guy speak, a guy, that's probably been a bit disrespectful. Patrick Lencioni is one of the great teams, coaches, if you like, consultants around the world. We were with him when he spoke in Sydney, and the one concept that he reminded us with and positioned us with that really left something with me was our role as leaders. He said we're the CROs, and everyone's sort of sitting there going, what's a CRO? He goes, the Chief Reminding Officer. He said realistically, because we think we give a notion or an idea or a direction to someone and they get it.
Yep.
He said it's been proven that you need to reinforce at least 7 times before it just goes boom. And he said with social media and technology these days, that's probably getting out to 10 times.
Yep.
So now it made me think, how many times do I just go to maybe say it once or twice? Or my kid's the perfect one. You know, do this that. Or no. But that's another concept what you're talking about here as well with if you just come in as that and as good as Hugh was, once it's not going to get the effect of constant reinforcement.
That's right, yeah. And so it's I guess it all sort of come together by recognising that, and then just in my surroundings every day coming in and looking at what a genuine coaching process is, and understanding, I guess, putting the two together. That's fundamentally how it all started. So it's not rocket science. It's pretty straightforward. But for me, what I saw out there in business at the moment, like I said, I'm not familiar with business anywhere near a lot of people out there, but I can see a real opportunity to.
Yeah, and I think you're downplaying a bit too when you say it's not rocket science. It may not be from a technical sense, but the thing you're dealing with is people and emotions, and that's where it becomes really difficult, and that's why I think most business owners just stay away from that. But what you've got evidence and really tap into this space, there's some wonderful results that can happen.
There is, mate. Yeah.
And maybe so it operates off a platform.
Yep.
Yep. So online and you communicate how?
Yeah, so once again, there was a bit of research went into that on how that's delivered. Me being my vintage and technically challenged, as you make a joke about quite a bit, it was really important for me to keep it really simple. And so the foundation of it will be a text message. And so your employees receive a text message. And again, there was a lot of, and I was really, really stringent on this point about how it's delivered. And I'll make reference to the current NRL program that I've been dealing with for the past few years. I found it, and again, understanding the audience that we had, which were footy players, I personally found it far too complex. We had a process of basically 4 check-ins a year of 52 questions when you add them all up. So it's basically 12 questions and then another 40 on top of that. For me, you're sort of pushing the proverbial uphill right from the start there, because I think you've got a detachment that it's another survey. They just want me to tick a box here. It was too complicated. So check 5 goes into those 5 categories that we spoke of all. There's 7 questions because we split 2 of the categories up in relationships, family and friends, and health, physical and mental or emotional health. So 7 questions all up. It takes you less than a minute just to give some feedback on that information. And that's then where it starts to get interesting, Pete. That's where we start to get some really tangible results.
And as you talk results, what are some of those tangible results that you've seen?
So for me, probably one of the biggest ones, funnily enough, was around finance. Now, what would happen generally if you look at, I guess, going back to before this process, the wellbeing process, that let's say, for example, I had a player that would come in and he would say, I'm feeling anxious, I've got anxiety. The default process for me then, as the welfare manager, would go, anxiety, I've heard that, okay, I'm going to send you off to our EAP, for example, you need to talk to someone. Off they would go, and we'd instigate a process that for us, unfortunately, wasn't overly productive. Didn't have much good feedback on that process. So what wellbeing started to do, and this is where check 5 came in, is that similar sort of thing, and you can get on this results, is that people can start to identify little areas in their life that they may be not quite comfortable with. So the information, for example, that I'll get back from that player is not a good reading in the finance category. Now, this has happened to me. The reason I bring finance up is because it was so familiar. It happened time and time again. It was a really regular thing. What would happen is that would allow me to extend that conversation a little bit further. So, mate, what's going on here? I see with the finance. Yeah, I have got credit card problems. I've got debt. I need to blah, blah, blah. And then your good friend, Steve Main, the guys out there at PKF, for you guys, have been exceptional for us as an area or an ability to actually resolve those issues.
Help them.
Yeah. So that's what would happen, is that conversation would extend to a point where we understand we've got some serious financial matters. I then had a network or an avenue to point that issue to. I'm not exaggerating, within a really short space of time, 2 or 3 weeks period of time or whatever, I've got an athlete there who's jumping around training, kicking his heels together. No anxiety, that's all gone because he's had that issue solved. Yeah,
so effectively, because there'd be a lot of business owners going, well, I'm focused with work, not that's their life.
Yep.
Everyone's got shit going on, but I think the whole premise here is that if you can get people, as you say, less anxious or more comfortable, etc., you're going to get potentially less sick days, higher productivities. You get a lot of tangible benefits actually in the workplace. as an outcome.
I mentioned, and the single most, the absolutely most direct answer to that, and this is what people need to understand more than anything else here, is the correlation between that issue and then performance.
Yep.
So while that issue's going on, let's just think an athlete, but your employee's the same, performance, the data's in on this now, Beats. It's not if and then and whatever. It's not, I think you described one of the terms as fluffy, or it's not that anymore. The data is locked in. There's a guy called Professor David Lavelli who studied this for 5 years. It's in, it's locked in. This is where it starts to get interesting. Is that performance level, whilst that are in that state, will fluctuate. It'll be up, it'll be down. What we now know is, and this elite sporting organisations around the world are now knowing resolve that issue, get that through genuine care and coaching, through and get an understanding of how that works. The performance dial just keeps going up. That, more than anything, is what we need to try and get business owners to understand.
And we always talk, I do a lot of strategic planning with businesses, and it's funny when they first come into the strategic planning facilitation process, I run through a few exercises, and we always sort of lead them down a garden path a bit and try and get them to see where their head's at, saying what's more important, customers or your people.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I wouldn't say it's strong either way, you probably get a 50-50, but every time I sit there and say, no, absolutely your customers are important because they're paying your bills, but at the end of the day, your people are your most paramount, because if they're not right, your customers will never be looked after.
Yeah.
And I can see that straight away. If we invest more into our people and really look at that from an input point of view, then your output in the traditional business metrics have to be improved.
Absolutely, mate. Yeah. And this is where I wouldn't say it's frustrating, but from seeing this is what's happening in sport, and if you're looking at this purely from a performance point of view, this is what's happening. So you're looking at the individual. There's a really good quote from Simon Sinek. He's just a guy I love looking at his videos, but the foundation of this is that your managers aren't responsible for the job. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. So if you can go that step back behind that and start to get that side of it right, I think you're on a good, on a good upward spiral.
And I think that the key thing here, some people might be quite interested in this space but don't know how to go about it. And I know I've pushed a few clients onto you to have a chat, and that's all it is at first. It's just saying, have a yarn and just seeing if you can get benefit. And I think what surprised me is this applies from whether you've got a team of 5 or a team of 400 or whatever it may be. There's still a program that's there for you to be tailored, because at the end of the day, the outcome is having a high performance team. And I think, not a byproduct, but I think one of the real added benefits is that, mate, you show this sort of care for your employees and your team, they're telling other people about it. And, that recruitment process, that retention, staff turnover, that, I'm not going to say it's never an issue, but it certainly dials down from an intensity point of view.
Yeah, and I think we're at a real transition phase with this at the moment, where I think a lot of business people out there are struggling to get their head around, I think this has always been put as a bit of a sidewind. We'll just leave it over there, we'll say that we're doing it. For me, what that goes back to is, again, go back to those good organisations, and I know I'm referencing sport, but that's what I know, probably more than anything else. But if you go back to those good organisations and have a good close look at them, in particular the people in charge, the head coaches, it's the same model. It's the same reference, and that's what the athletes remember, that's what they'll talk about, and that's what they'll perform to, is someone who's showing some interest in them, showing some care in them. Results year in, year out, year in, year out, just keep coming. And that's where this has all sort of brought this to the table.
Yeah, and I think, I understand the business is in its infancy at the moment, but I've seen how much inquiry and how much, traction you've got already with people just in business just going, shit, this is exactly what I've been what I've been thinking of. Yeah. And the business owner doesn't necessarily know how to deal with it. So, it's been quite encouraging, I guess, how much the general business community is straight away getting what you're talking about and wanting to get on board with this.
Absolutely, mate. And, not without trying to embarrass, I've got to thank you personally, because you've just thrown it out there, and everyone that we've spoken to so far, and look, that might be my style a bit. I probably might not have the polish of some of our people down in Sydney or whatever it might be down in that space, but I think particularly in our region, you know, the ability just to sit down and to talk with people and just be straight and say, well, this is what I think, this is where I think this can help. Yeah, it's been really well received so far.
Yeah, it's good. And I guess probably a final question before we start to wrap up. You know, you've had a very varied past. As you said, it's all got probably that theme of people and coaching. But from the days in the cells to working with elite sports people, and now into that business world, what's some of your maybe hardest but best lessons you've learnt and that people can learn from?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, but I think if I was to look back over it now more than anything else, it's the value that every single person has. So I look back, you know, like you said, to the cells and the fellow I was talking back then, at some point even
I wasn't in there either, just quietly.
I was on the other side. Actually, I would go in and sit in there, but I look back now and even that guy has brought some value, even possibly without knowing it. And I think it's really easy to probably move forward. You know, well, I check myself all the time about not putting myself on a pedestal and thinking that I know everything. For me, the single biggest lesson I've learned is how much value every single person can bring you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, every single person. You know, that might be old Neville and the gear steward over at the Knights, has been there forever and a day. Just a conversation with Nev, as opposed, you know, like just as much sitting in a room with Wayne Bennett and chewing the fat with him. I might get just as much value out of that fella filling the water bottles or whatever. So for me, it's really, really important not to overlook anyone.
Yeah,
everyone can give you some value at some point.
That's solid. And then, you know, we did a video recently with Chief, and I know you're very tight with Paul, and he did a different perspective on that, but one of his key comments that really left an impact was the problem most of us, we don't often have an understanding of what's going on for the other person, and therefore conflict the rest. But that's nearly aligns to what you're talking about exactly there.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Mate, that's great. We could talk about this all day because it's a big topic I'm interested in as well, and we will be doing a lot more in this space from a point of view of maybe giving a bit away to people and letting them get that start and help. But if we bring it together, basically we're saying well-being isn't that, you know, fluffy and warm sort of thing that everyone probably thought of before, and we're really, Check 5 really focus on these 5 areas that I think all of us can relate to. And what we're doing there is to say, let's actually coach the coaches, I guess the best way to put it, in regards to bringing that well-being as a forefront to your people framework. Yeah, a lot of people look at HR and go, we've got to have the legal documents, we've got to have the frame, but this is really getting down to the performance side of it. You know, and it's applying what works in high performance sporting teams, that whole logic to business, and making sure our people, one, are comfortable in their own lives, or two, have an avenue to talk about, but before there's an issue, back when, you know, when it's in its foundations, I guess, that then will lead to better performance within the business.
Spot on.
Yeah. So I did listen, mate.
You did. Yeah.
So, I mean, anything to add there? Because to me, Check 5, it's a wonderful concept. I'm right behind this one. I think it can really make the difference between having a business that's so-so and a great business.
Yeah. Look, the only other thing, and again, I'm really hoping. I'm just looking. Oh, mate's going to back into my car. They don't do that. I'm really not trying to sound controversial in the fact that what I would urge business owners to do as well is to not just make that automatic connection to mental health. In my opinion, mental health is one component to your well-being, but there's a far broader scope that we can look at and work towards, you know, genuinely getting some results out of beyond just that mental health. You know, if we can, like we just said, for the example around the finances, and might be relationships or whatever it might be, there's an absolute avenue for that, but it's not just that. So that's probably one of the biggest things. Just to finish off on what you said, because you summarised it well.
And I think, from what I've seen already in this space, it applies to small business, large business, blue collar, white collar. At the end of the day, we're all people. We've all got stuff going on, and when you bring that back to getting the most out of it, this program's just spot on. So finally, if people did want to reach out, it's dean@check5.com.au.
That's it.
Check5 with the number.com.au. So, mate, that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate it, mate. Thanks very much.
Hopefully, the business owners, you can get a lot out of this, even if you're whether it be with Check5 or not, just really taking that interest in your people. But until next time, once again, cheers.